it's known that there were 10 Egyptian plagues. But the Torah doesn't actually say it anywhere that the number is 10. You have to realize that some of these numbers that we're so accustomed to, some of them are mentioned in the Torah itself, but some of them, they're really at most part of the oral tradition. In some cases there is actually a dispute in rabbinical writings what the total number is of something. I'll give you a few examples offhand. Practically every Orthodox Jew knows that there are 613 commandments in the Torah. You ask probably a 6-year-old kid, a boy or a girl, how many commandments are there? Most likely, if they come from an Orthodox family, they'll say there are 613 commandments. And indeed, there is a midrash like that in the Talmud and in various Kabbalistic writings. Also, this is mentioned. But a number of commentators questioned if everybody agrees with this number. And in particular, whether the Jerusalem Talmud, the Yerushalmi, also had similar tradition. At least the Torah nowhere says that the number of commandments is 613. On the other hand, the so-called 10 commandments, it's actually a non-Jewish term. Nowhere do we find in either the written Torah or in Chazal's words the expression 10 commandments. That would mean in Hebrew asara mitzvot or something like that. It never is called mitzvot. But the number 10 is in fact mentioned in the Torah itself. There are 3 places where it's mentioned. Not the first time when actually the Jewish people heard it the first time at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. The revelation of Sinai doesn't say that there were 10. But later on in Parshat Ki Tisa, and also twice in the book of Dvarim, in Parshat V'etchanan and Ekev, it mentions the expression Aseret HaDvarim, not 10 commandments, 10 sayings or 10 statements or 10 things. Dvarim could mean any of these things. So it's 10 expressions, I guess. 10. So we definitely know there are 10 because the Torah says there are 10. How to divide is a separate story, but at least we know that total number has to be 10. But it's not mitzvot. There are much more than 10 mitzvot in there. The number of total mitzvot, the commandments, is actually closer to at least 13 or 14, maybe more. It depends on how you count. But there are a lot of commandments in these 10 statements. We're just talking about the separate commandments. Shabbat has a number of commandments. The prohibitions of idolatry and of making images of divine, all of that has a number of separate commandments. So there are more than 10 commandments from Jewish point of view. But 10 statements, 10 sayings, 10 aseret advarim. So like I said, the number 10 is at least mentioned in the Torah. The number 613 is not. Certainly the Torah has a lot more than 10 commandments in the total. Torah has hundreds of commandments, but how to count exactly and what the total number is, whether there was ever a dispute, it's a question. It could be that not everybody agrees that the total number has to be 613. Another good example is 13 principles of divine mercy. I think most people heard about that too. Midot harachamim, what we call. Right? In our prayers, we often cite a verse from Parshat Ki Tisa, when Hashem tells Moshe how he is merciful. Hashem, kel rachum v'chanun, erech apayim v'rav chesed v'emet. So these are expressions that every Orthodox Jew knows by heart. We say it in many of our prayers. And the Sephardim and the Hasidic Jews say it practically every day during Tachanun. Therefore, these expressions are very familiar. Of course, everybody says them during Slichot and during Yom Kippur. So these are 13 principles of divine mercy. But the number 13 is nowhere mentioned in the Torah. Moreover, there is even a midrash that holds that the total number is not 13 but less. Depending on how you divide, there are many different opinions how to count 13 there, whether which are considered separate principles of mercy here. But even the total number, the 13, is actually subject to dispute. There were opinions that there were fewer than 13. But the most commonly known opinion, which is also in the Talmud, is that there are 13 principles here. Another number 13, some people might recall once you already mentioned 13. The other number 13 is 13 principles of faith. That's for sure nowhere in the Talmud because it's Rambam, the Maimonides, who was the first one to divide all our dogma. Most of the Orthodox Jews, mostly for us, the first thing that generally a Jew is taught from the very early childhood is constantly to how to keep the commandments. This is the practical application is usually the central. But there is also dogma in Judaism. Judaism obviously has dogma, like any religion has to have some kind of dogma. So Rambam tried to kind of codify it and put it together. He wrote it in many of his writings. In his commentary to the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, in his Mishnah Torah, he writes it not exactly like in order of 13, but he also mentions the same ideas in Hilchot Tshuva, for instance. He definitely wrote it in a number of different places, this idea of 13 principles of faith. The number 13 specifically is from his commentary on the Mishnah, how he divides all the Jewish dogma into 13 general principles. So that number, of course, is a very late number, and there were all kinds of other ideas in various times, in the medieval times, by various sages, what are the main principles of Jewish faith. One great author thought that there are three main principles of Jewish faith. Basically, it's the three that we mention in the prayers of Rosh Hashanah. The believe in Hashem, the believe in the Torah, and the fact that Hashem rules over the world. That Hashem is not, as some ancient philosophers used to think, and some people think that way today, that there is a creator, but he doesn't really deal with the little things like people. You know, we're like less than ants in his eyes. That's their opinion. So it's important for us to believe that Hashem, in fact, does deal with it. There is a Hashgacha Pratit, was called, that Hashem rules over the world. He does everything in the world. He is not just left it on its own, kind of. So that's the three main principles. So in Rosh Hashanah, we have three middle prayers in Musaf, and there's various verses of the Torah from three parts of Torah, three verses from which we mention all for these three ideas. First, that Hashem is king. That's the first idea. Malchiot, what's called. The second idea is that Hashem remembers people, takes care of people, zichronot. And the last one is shofarot, that has to do with giving of the Torah. Not all of these psukim have to do with giving of the Torah, but at least shofar is a major part of the giving of the Torah. There were voices of shofar, blows of shofar. So according to some opinions, this is the third principle of faith hinted here too. So the three main principles. But like I said, Rambam thinks that there are 13 principles of faith altogether. There are some sages who thought that there is no such thing altogether as dividing principles of faith. You just have to believe what the Torah says, and therefore there are no specific principles. Whatever Torah says, that's what our faith is. But the majority of sages try to kind of codify what are the principles of Jewish faith, what are the minimal requirements of Jewish dogma. After all, not everything that some rabbi somewhere interpreted you have to believe. Let's say if a person does not believe in Gilgul, or does believe in Gilgul, that's not a principle of faith. It's not it's a choice. Some people believe in reincarnation, some people don't believe in reincarnation. So there are a lot of different things like that are not principles of faith. But for instance, the belief that Hashem exists or that He is one, those are the kinds of principles of faith that are very important in Judaism. Coming back to why I started all this, right? As often I digress to many different topics. I mean, some people like it, some people don't. So I would mention here in the introduction of Tshuvat V'Anhagot of Ramosh Steinbuch, a very well-known sage in Israel, and he also was a rabbi in South Africa for a while. So he writes in the introduction of his book that a lot of different people tell me, do it like this, do it like that, write differently. So I wrote a book for those who like this particular style. If you don't like it, just don't read it. So my point is that there's not so many people who listen to my videos anyway. If there are 20 people who listen and maybe 5 of them actually finish, or even less. So, okay, so those are the people who like my style and whatever methods I use. So a lot of people would rather prefer somebody who stays on one topic and focuses, so they could find videos of other people. At any rate, coming back to what I started with, and that is the 10 plagues. So the Torah doesn't say there are 10 plagues. And in fact, there is an interesting idea that's brought by some sages, including Shadali, that maybe we have to count 12 plagues. How do you count 12? So you have to include, well, not all of them are plagues, but various signs and wonders that Hashem did through Moshe in Egypt. So one additional one will count before the other 10, and that is when the staff became a snake or a crocodile, whatever it was, the tanin. That's before the actual 10 plagues, but we could count it also as one of the one of the signs. And then also the splitting of the sea, and the last one, which again is usually not counted within that 10. The 10th one under normal counting is the plague of Bichorot, of the firstborn. But whatever happened at the sea is considered separate. But if you include that, then altogether you have 12 now. One added before and one after. So what that actually gives you, what's the advantage of looking at it as 12? The advantage is that there is a little symmetry here now, because 12 is 3 times 4, so we have 4 groups of 3 now. And in each group, the first one is without a warning, and usually it's the least damaging one. For instance, the staff that turned into a snake or into a little crocodile or something, that didn't really kill anybody, or it didn't really bring major damage. And similarly, the first one in every group of 3 will be like that, according to this opinion. So, for example, in the last 3, according to this division, the last 3 would be darkness, then Bechorot, and then whatever happened at the sea. So the first of that group, again, is without warning, and it didn't really bring any deaths, at least according to the simple meaning of the Torah, right? The darkness. And similarly, in each of these groups. So there are other symmetries. So according to this, there were 12 plagues, or 12 signs and different wonders that happened. And they're divided into 4 groups of 3, with each group of 3 having a specific pattern. That's just an interesting idea I wanted to mention here. And if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.